I want to make sure we covered this really great article you wrote for Scientific American about this sort of very small tribe of runners who sort of produce this sort of like obscenely disproportionate number of like marathon winners and like Olympic gold medalists and stuff. So I just want to give you a chance to sort of say a little bit more about that. And weirdly enough, it does tie into what we're discussing about sort of the. I'll just let you go. I'll let you just.
No, that article you're talking about is about East African runners and why they're so good now. And it did come out of this same research and same ideas that the book did as well. You know, whereas kind of the conventional wisdom is that Kenyans and Ethiopians are just genetically better runners than us because of some evolutionary reason, and that always seemed a little bit too easy to me. Yeah. And when you look at this little town called Bekoji in Ethiopia that's produced like 25. It's a town of 16,000 people. Yeah. No dirt, dirt roads. There's nothing there really. It's just this one coach who started coaching 30 years ago, and then he had one runner, I think Dara Tulu, who won a gold medal in Barcelona, I think, and then he started getting more runners and come into his camp and stuff, and developed this culture in the village that combined technical training knowledge that he had or he developed with this belief and this narrative system where, again, when you are training with somebody and you know them and then you see them on the Olympic screen in the bar, it makes that narrative become more possible. It locates the causal, forces more closely to you and think, if this person can do it, I can do it. That's a possible path for me, and at scale that can create these little cultures. And there's a similar place in Kenya that has the same thing. So the genetic idea, obviously health and diet and all those things are important, but it doesn't explain why this one town has all these runners and the town down the road doesn't. So that was kind of the exploration of that idea. And in fact, this year in the Olympics, you saw Americans really make a big comeback in a way that they haven't for a long time. And I think that will change. I mean, the Kenyans and Ethiopians have only been dominating for 20 years, really. And so I think once people start to believe that they can also compete at that level, in a certain way, or not be intimidated, that will change. And I think it is changing. Yeah.
It's interesting how it comes in sort of waves like that. Like you mentioned, I think in the article,
in the 30s and 40s, the Finnish runners were the best in the world, and it was all the same sort of environmental explanations were given for but they live in the wilderness and they run through the woods and they're wild people basically, and there are all these climactic theories about they have the right climactic energy there, and so it's very similar to the same kind of things people say about Kenyan runners and Ethiopian runners,
And then I think one of the last things I wanted to chat with you about, I think we should probably wrap it up pretty soon. But I think we talked about this in our interview, but I don't know if you mentioned it in your book, but there was this great story about the Coca-Cola factory.
The Belgian mass psychogenic illness. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about mass psychogenic illnesses, because they're not just, it's not just penis theft in Nigeria. You do see this in the West as well.
Right. There was. So some people do consider the Koro epidemics like a mass psychogenic illness, and I think obviously these things all happen on a scale, like the way that they flow through populations. Like I was talking about before, the mass psychogenic illnesses are like the same thing on fast forward. They happen really fast. They go really burn out really fast. They go through a population. Like there was a famous laughing epidemic that affected girls in schools in Tanzania in 1963 and 64. That girls couldn't stop laughing, and I found two papers about in Winnipeg, Canada, there was a hiccup epidemic in 1922 that affected 1,000 people, and in 1924 that affected 1,400 people. People couldn't stop hiccuping. It happens a lot, actually, more often than you think. That thing with the girls in Leroy, New York, where they all had that twitching thing.
Yeah.
That was also a mass psychogenic illness, and the reason they knew it was because usually it happens in schools, and it usually affects girls for some reason. There's more, I don't know why, more social receptiveness or something like that. That nobody understands exactly why, but it doesn't affect like their family members or things like that. It's always kind of in a social group. And the Belgian one that you're talking about was in 1999. A bunch of students in a school drank some Coca-Cola, and they had like headaches, dizziness, vomiting, abdominal pains, diarrhea, and then it started to spread as people heard about it. It started to spread to other schools. It spread to 5 schools, 147 students, 943 calls to the poison control, and Coca-Cola spent in the end between like $100 and $250 million trying to figure out what went wrong, and they could not find anything. And so it's possible that this mass psychogenic illness just cost them $250,000 for to find nothing, basically.
Yeah, I mean, so that sort of reminds me of the sort of Wi-Fi sickness you hear brought up every so often, where people get convinced that Wi-Fi is causing whatever number.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do if you're in a position like Coca-Cola, or if you're someone who wants to have internet at their house? Is there sort of an easy solution to things like that?
Well, it's tough because you can't just change people's beliefs. You can't. Like we were talking about before, you can say, well, you're wrong about this, but depending on the context and depending on the person, they could just reject that and say, no, I'm not wrong, and you're wrong, and so there must be ways to approach people, especially if they're having real problems. I mean, usually with things like the Coca-Cola thing, it just goes away after a little bit.
Yeah.
But with the Wi-Fi thing, I think there's a significant element of that in the gluten intolerance thing that's going on right now. People's negative expectations can really create these sort of symptoms. And another one is the windmill syndrome. Have you heard of that?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
These huge windmills get like a weird thing in their ear, and they get like sick and stuff, and so the symptoms are real, but whether they're caused by the windmills is we don't know, but they're probably not. So I don't know. It's hard to explain that to people, especially when they are experiencing real symptoms. But it's really common, and you can see it throughout history, and you can see it in all over the world.
Yeah, man. Well, so on that note, I think we should wrap up. Frank, it's great chatting with you. Your book, Geography of Madness, would highly recommend. It was a lot of fun reading it, and a lot of fun talking to you about it. Thanks again to Meaning of Life for letting us host this conversation, and to Religion Dispatches and their Qubit vertical for getting us chatting in the first place. It was great, and check out Frank's stuff. All right, take care, dude.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.